The ship was not supposed to stop. Every warning light said it was stupid, every protocol said it was dangerous, and every rational calculation said the odds of survival were too low to justify the risk. The debris field stretched across space like a shattered mirror, fragments of metal spinning silently, energy flickering in unstable pulses. Somewhere inside the chaos, a tiny escape pod drifted without power, barely visible against the cosmic darkness. The human pilot stared at the readings, sighed, and muttered something that would have made the mission instructors very unhappy. He turned the ship around anyway. Thrusters roared, shielding systems strained, and the vessel cut through the debris with reckless precision. Each impact rattled the hull, alarms screamed, and the onboard AI calmly suggested retreat with increasingly dramatic wording. But he didn't listen. He adjusted course manually, guiding the ship toward the powerless pod as if logic had never existed in the first place. When the docking clamps finally locked onto the escape pod, he exhaled slowly, not in triumph but in relief. Opening the hatch, he expected anything: smoke, damaged machinery, maybe even nothing at all. Instead, he found her. She was small compared to humans, her features unfamiliar yet strangely expressive. Her eyes were wide, not with panic but with intense observation, as if she were memorizing every detail of the moment. Her hands were trembling, not from fear but from exhaustion. The pod's life support was failing, its systems barely functional. He didn't hesitate. He lifted her carefully, guided her into his ship, sealed the hatch, and rerouted power to stabilize her environment. The ship felt suddenly warmer. For a while, she said nothing. She watched him with quiet focus as he worked, fingers moving across controls, voice muttering half-jokes to himself, posture relaxed despite the chaos outside. When he offered her water, she studied the container as if it were a complex artifact rather than a simple bottle. When he smiled awkwardly, she tilted her head slightly, as if trying to decode the meaning behind the gesture. Eventually, she spoke. Her voice was soft, precise, almost mechanical in rhythm. Every word sounded carefully selected, as though language were not instinct but calculation. "You altered trajectory," she said. "Yeah," he replied casually. "Couldn't just leave you floating out there. Your mission parameters did not require intervention." "True," he said, shrugging. "But parameters are boring." She stared at him longer than necessary. "Boring," she repeated, tasting the word like data. The ship jumped to safer coordinates soon after. Rescue signals were sent. Protocols were followed again, reluctantly. Time passed in quiet fragments. She asked questions. Many questions. Why humans laughed when nothing was funny. Why they made decisions without sufficient data. Why he risked his ship for someone he didn't know. Why he smiled when he was tired. Why he spoke to machines as if they were alive. He answered as best he could, though most of his responses were jokes, guesses, or half-formed thoughts. "Sometimes you just feel like doing something," he said once. "Define feel," she replied instantly. He paused, searching for words that didn't exist in manuals or textbooks. It's like knowing something without proof." Her eyes narrowed slightly, processing that concept with visible difficulty. When the rescue fleet arrived, everything happened very fast. Officials boarded the ship, communication devices activated, translations loaded, and a group of unfamiliar figures appeared at the entrance. They looked like her, but older, more controlled, their expressions neutral and unreadable. They spoke to her in rapid tones. She responded with equal precision, though she glanced back at the human pilot several times during the exchange. Before leaving, she turned toward him one last time. "You acted without logical justification," she said. "Yeah," he replied with a crooked smile. "That's kind of our thing." She studied him again, longer than before. "Your behavior increased my probability of survival from near zero to significant levels," she said. "Well," he said lightly, "guess you owe me a coffee or something." She didn't understand the joke. He hesitated, then leaned slightly against the control panel, trying to ease the awkward silence. "You know," he said, half smiling, half teasing, When you grow up, you can marry me if you want. He laughed immediately after saying it, clearly not expecting the sentence to mean anything. She did not laugh. Her eyes focused sharply, pupils adjusting, expression freezing as if the words had triggered a complex internal process. She raised her wrist and activated a faint holographic interface only she could see. Symbols flickered across the invisible display. He waved his hand dismissively. Relax, it was a joke, he said. Humans say weird things sometimes. She did not respond. The rescue team gently guided her away. As she stepped onto their ship, she turned her head one last time. Their eyes met across the gap between metal hulls and silent space. Her gaze was not emotional. It was deliberate. Then the hatch closed. The human pilot watched the rescue ship disappear into the distance, and felt nothing dramatic, no sense of destiny, no cosmic significance. To him, it was just another strange day in a universe full of strange days. He returned to his routines, his missions, his ordinary life. The memory of the alien girl faded slowly, blending into the countless stories he would never tell. Years passed. He forgot the joke. She did not. On a distant world, far beyond human charts, she sat in a chamber filled with light and data. Around her, holographic structures formed complex patterns, representing probabilities, outcomes, and behavioral models. Her species valued logic above all else. Emotion was studied, not trusted. Instinct was analyzed, not obeyed. She replayed the memory again and again. A human voice. An impulsive decision. A sentence that had no logical necessity yet carried unusual weight. When you grow up, you can marry me if you want. She translated it into multiple frameworks: social bonding, alliance formation, symbolic commitment, humor-based interaction, cultural metaphor. None of the models fully explained the phrase. So she built new ones. She analyzed human psychology, historical patterns, emotional behaviors, and decision-making anomalies. She studied heroism, sacrifice, and irrational kindness. She mapped his actions against millions of possible alternatives and calculated the probability of each. The result was always the same. He should not have saved her. But he did. Her data grew. Her understanding deepened. And somewhere in the expanding universe, a simple human joke slowly transformed into a mathematical certainty waiting to be tested. He was in the middle of a perfectly ordinary morning when the sky changed. At first, he thought it was just another atmospheric glitch, one of those strange visual distortions caused by orbital traffic or experimental satellites. The clouds above the city rippled unnaturally, bending like glass under pressure. Then the air vibrated, not loudly, not violently, but with a deep, steady resonance that made windows hum and people stop mid-step. Within seconds, the sky split open. A massive alien vessel descended silently, its surface smooth and reflective, shaped in geometry no human engineer would dare design. Light poured from its underside in controlled beams, scanning the city with clinical precision. Streets filled with chaos, cameras pointed upward, and global networks exploded with speculation before anyone on the ground had time to understand what was happening. He watched it all from the balcony of his apartment, coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. "Okay," he murmured. "That's new." His communicator activated automatically, flooded with emergency alerts and government requests. Before he could even process them, his doorbell rang. He frowned. No one rang doorbells anymore. When he opened the door, there was no delivery drone, no neighbor, no confused official. Instead, a tall figure stood in the hallway, posture perfectly straight, expression unreadable. The figure looked almost human at first glance, but something in the symmetry was too precise, too deliberate. Behind her, the hallway lights flickered faintly. She looked at him as if she had been waiting for this moment for years. "You have aged," she said. He blinked. Thanks?" She stepped forward without asking permission, scanning the apartment with calm, methodical movements. Her eyes traced every object, every surface, every detail, as though she were mapping his life in real time. "You are the designated subject," she said. Designated for what? He asked. She turned toward him slowly. For marriage evaluation. He stared at her. Then he laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was the kind of laugh people make when reality becomes so absurd that logic simply gives up. Right, he said, leaning against the wall. Sure. And I'm the Emperor of Mars. She didn't react. Instead, she raised her wrist. A translucent holographic interface appeared in the air between them, filled with complex charts, shifting numbers, and geometric models. The data moved too fast for him to follow, but he could still recognize patterns, graphs, and probability curves. You were previously identified as the primary causal factor in my survival event, she said. His smile faded slightly. He looked at her more carefully now. Her voice. Her eyes. The faint, unfamiliar structure of her features. Memory hit him slowly, like a delayed signal traveling across years. No way, he said quietly. She tilted her head. Your recognition delay is statistically consistent with human memory decay, she replied. You're the pod, he said. Correct. He stared at her in disbelief. You're grown up, he said, stating the obvious. Yes, she replied. That is the standard progression of biological development. He rubbed his face with his hands, trying to reboot his brain. So, he said slowly, you came all the way here because… She expanded the holographic display. New layers of data appeared, forming a three-dimensional model of two silhouettes, one human, one alien, connected by glowing lines. After analyzing your verbal statement during our initial encounter, she said, I concluded that you proposed a future bonding agreement. He choked slightly. I did not propose anything, he said quickly. That was a joke. She paused. Define joke, she said. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Okay, he said cautiously. A joke is when humans say things they don't literally mean, usually to make other humans feel less scared or more comfortable. She processed this for several seconds. I have studied human humor extensively, she said. Your explanation is incomplete. Of course it is, he said. Human humor is chaos. She nodded slightly, as if confirming a hypothesis. Nevertheless, she continued, your statement created a unique behavioral anomaly in my cognitive framework. Therefore, I conducted a long-term analysis of your suitability as a life partner. He felt a strange chill. You did what? The hologram shifted again. Now it showed hundreds of data streams branching outward like neural networks. I evaluated your psychological profile, she said calmly. Your risk-taking behavior, empathy indicators, social adaptability, and resilience under stress. I compared these metrics against millions of potential candidates across multiple civilizations. He stared at the swirling data. And? He asked. She looked at him directly. You achieved the highest composite compatibility score, she said. He laughed again, but this time the sound was weaker. You're telling me, he said slowly, that you invaded Earth because I scored well on some cosmic dating app? This is not an application, she said. It is a statistical inevitability. He opened his mouth to argue, but she was already continuing. I constructed probability models predicting the long-term outcomes of various partnership scenarios, she said. In 87.3% of simulations, our union produced optimal emotional stability, cooperative efficiency, and cross-species cultural advancement. He felt dizzy. You ran simulations, he said. Yes. Of us? Yes. He sat down heavily on the couch. She walked toward him with measured steps, stopping exactly 1 meter away. Her posture was perfect, as if even distance were calculated. According to my analysis, she said, commencing a relationship with you is the most rational course of action. He stared up at her. People usually start relationships with dinner, he said weakly. She nodded once. I have prepared a schedule, she said. He froze. She extended her hand again. The holographic display expanded, filling the room with floating panels. Dates, charts, timelines, emotional benchmarks, and performance indicators hovered in the air like a futuristic nightmare. Phase 1, Social Interaction Calibration, she said. Phase 2, Emotional Resonance Testing. Phase 3, Long-Term Bonding Optimization. He looked at the data. Then he looked at her. Then he looked back at the data. Somewhere, far above the city, the massive alien ship continued to hover silently, waiting. He realized, with slow and terrible clarity, that the joke he had made years ago had not been forgotten. It had been studied. And now, it was back, armed with mathematics, probability, and an extremely serious plan to optimize his entire emotional future. He woke up the next morning to a precise humming sound that seemed to follow him everywhere. At first, he thought it was the coffee machine, or maybe a glitch in the building's power grid, but then he saw it, a small hovering device trailing her as she moved around his apartment. Its surface shimmered with charts and glowing data points, tracking his every movement. He sighed, rubbed his eyes, and wondered how it was possible for a human life to feel this overwhelmingly complicated before breakfast. She was already at the kitchen counter, clipboard hovering in midair, wrist-mounted hologram projecting graphs. Her posture was perfect, her expression neutral, but the intensity in her eyes made it clear she wasn't neutral in thought. She studied the coffee brewing with the same attention a scientist might give to a chemical reaction. "I've calculated your caffeine consumption," she said. "It is suboptimal relative to metabolic efficiency during morning cognitive activity." He chuckled weakly. "You mean I drink too little coffee?" "Incorrect. You drink an average amount, but your energy curve indicates a 12.7% deficit in optimal alertness for early morning decision-making." He blinked. You're going to optimize my mornings?" "Yes," she said simply, adjusting a holographic slider. "And your emotional response to caffeine intake. Humor levels will be recorded as control variables." He slumped into the nearest chair, feeling simultaneously amazed and exhausted. "I think I should leave for work." "That would be counterproductive," she replied. "I have calculated a 38% probability that commuting will reduce your daily efficiency. I suggest Phase 1, breakfast bonding exercise." He groaned, realizing resistance was futile. The day had officially become a statistical experiment in love. Over the next several hours, she systematically applied her relationship optimization program. Every interaction had a purpose. When he poured milk into his cereal, she measured the ratio, adjusted it slightly, and recorded the emotional reaction on her wrist display. When he laughed at a bad joke from the morning news, she noted the duration and intensity of the response, comparing it against hundreds of thousands of simulations in her data banks. Lunch was no different. She had arranged the plates according to caloric efficiency, portion size, and visual appeal. She instructed him to sit at a specific angle relative to the sunlight to maximize serotonin production. As he obediently moved his chair 5 degrees to the left, he muttered, "I feel like a character in a badly written sci-fi movie." "You are a human subject," she said. "Not a character." By mid-afternoon, he realized she had already logged every word, gesture, and sigh he had emitted since she arrived. She had charts predicting his emotional reactions to minor inconveniences, graphs mapping how quickly he would grow frustrated, and models projecting the optimal intervals for physical affection versus personal space. "I feel like I'm dating a spreadsheet," he muttered. "Incorrect," she said. "This is not dating. This is optimization. A human romance has historically produced suboptimal results due to random emotional interference. My program reduces these variables." He shook his head, a small smile breaking through. "Random emotional interference, you mean feelings?" "Correct," she said calmly. "Feelings are inefficient but detectable. They require regulation for optimal relationship performance." And yet, despite all her calculations, something strange began to happen. During a scheduled emotional resonance exercise, Where he was supposed to smile on cue while discussing mundane daily activities, she hesitated. Her wrist display flickered erratically. She recalculated and recalculated again, but the data refused to settle. Every formula contradicted the next. "Your laughter patterns are inconsistent with expected outcomes," she said, almost in disbelief. "That's the point," he said, leaning back in exasperation. "I don't need a perfect plan. I just feel things, you know?" She studied him, the holographic charts spinning rapidly. "Feeling cannot be measured?" "Not completely," he admitted. "Sometimes you just do stuff without knowing why. That's human." For a moment, she stood silently, processing. Then she adjusted her models again, muttering probabilities under her breath. She tried to control the situation with even more scheduling, even more precise exercises, but slowly, the rigidity began to crack. She noticed herself pausing when he made an unplanned joke, lingering a little longer when he reached for her hand spontaneously, feeling a reaction she couldn't log anywhere. She became aware of the anomaly. Some aspects of him could not be optimized. There was chaos in his humanity she couldn't quantify, and for the first time, it intrigued her. The more she tried to structure it, the more she realized that perhaps she didn't want to structure it at all. He noticed the change in her demeanor as well. She still brought charts, still tracked variables, still initiated scheduled bonding. But there was hesitation now, a softness creeping into her methodical precision. It was subtle, a pause that lingered just long enough for him to notice. When she smiled at a particularly bad pun he made during lunch, it wasn't in line with any efficiency metric, it was genuine, unpredictable. By evening, their optimization sessions had transformed into something unplanned. They argued about which movie to watch, and she demanded probabilities for both choices. He refused, insisting that sometimes you just choose. She tried to calculate anyway but eventually gave up, letting him pick. They laughed, not because it improved efficiency or relationship metrics, but simply because it was funny. Later, as she sat analyzing the day's data, she paused. Her holographic displays hovered silently, numbers frozen mid-calculation. For the first time, she wondered if love was more than a sum of measurable variables. He noticed the pause and nudged her gently. "You don't have to calculate everything," he said. "Sometimes, it's okay to just feel it." She looked at him, expression unreadable but eyes flickering with a hesitation that wasn't in her original programming. For the first time, she admitted to herself that some things, like laughter, like surprise, like the warmth of an unplanned touch, could not be optimized, and perhaps didn't need to be. And as the night settled over the city, with their apartment filled with both charts and laughter, both logic and chaos, the human realized something remarkable. She was learning to be unpredictable, and he was learning to accept a little structure. For the first time in years, the world felt like it belonged to both of them, not as an experiment, not as a probability, but as something entirely, delightfully human. Days passed, and their routine became a strange mixture of calculations and chaos. She still brought charts to breakfast, still hovered data streams over his coffee cup, still adjusted his posture and monitored his emotional responses. Yet now, when he laughed at an absurd comment or reached for her hand impulsively, she hesitated, blinked, and for the first time, acted without consulting her holographic models. It was subtle, a flicker in her normally perfect system, but he noticed immediately. That tiny unpredictability made her feel less alien and more alive. He realized the shift slowly. She no longer interrupted moments of genuine humor to record data. She smiled when something amused her, even if it didn't fit any efficiency metric. When he was frustrated, she didn't always try to correct him. Sometimes, she just waited. She was learning to allow uncertainty, to tolerate emotion without managing it, and it fascinated him to watch. It was as if the rigid logic that had defined her entire being was bending around something she didn't understand, something he did. One evening, after a long day of simulated relationship optimization exercises, she floated silently near the balcony, staring out at the city lights. Her wrist display hummed quietly, but no charts appeared. He came up behind her and leaned on the railing. "You're quiet," he said. "I am observing the results of my recent data recalibrations," she replied. "They do not conform to expected patterns." "You mean your charts are broken?" "They are incomplete," she corrected. "They cannot account for human choice." He laughed softly, resting his hand on the cold metal of the railing. "Choice, huh? That's what makes humans weird, and kind of amazing." She turned slightly, her eyes reflecting the lights of the city. "I find the variability intriguing." He smiled. "You're saying you like it?" "I am saying it defies my predictive models," she admitted. "And yet, I do not wish to eliminate it." It was the first time she had expressed a desire unrelated to optimization. The words hung in the air between them like a fragile bridge. He didn't know whether to feel nervous or thrilled. He chose thrilled. "Maybe love isn't supposed to be predictable," he said. "Maybe it's okay to just be with someone, even if it doesn't make sense." She paused, processing. Then she exhaled, a small, human-like sound. "I do not have a model for this," she said. "And yet I wish to continue with you." He laughed, partly out of relief and partly because it felt impossible to believe. "You're really saying that? You're just going to wing it?" "Not wing it," she corrected. "Choose it." He blinked. The word choice, simple, human, unpredictable, carried more weight than any equation, any graph, any probability curve she had ever calculated. In that moment, the distance between logic and emotion collapsed. She had finally acknowledged that some things could not be measured, predicted, or optimized. Some things, like connection and love, had to be experienced. Over the following days, they began redefining what their relationship meant. She still brought occasional charts, but they were now playful rather than authoritative. She would present probability graphs predicting their success, and he would shake his head, laughing, and draw a heart in the air instead. They debated schedules, tested emotional exercises, and occasionally indulged in absurd optimization drills. But the drills became games. Sometimes she would insist on efficiency during a dinner date, only to abandon the rules entirely halfway through because he had made her laugh in a way that couldn't be calculated. They discovered a rhythm that blended both of their worlds, his chaotic human spontaneity and her structured alien logic. She learned that unpredictability wasn't dangerous. He learned that a little planning could make life smoother, even if it wasn't necessary. They began to trust each other, not because metrics guaranteed compatibility, but because they chose to. One night, as the city slept under the dim glow of distant stars, she turned to him, her expression softer than he had ever seen. The faint traces of data streams flickered around her wrists, but the numbers didn't dominate her presence anymore. "You know," she said quietly, "the original promise, when you spoke it years ago, was recorded in my system. I have reviewed it countless times." He felt a flicker of embarrassment. "Yeah. I was joking. I didn't mean anything." Her eyes met his, unwavering. "I have concluded that your statement, though intended as humor, has led to a series of events statistically improbable, yet emotionally significant. I choose to honor it, not because of data, but because I want to." He froze for a moment. Then slowly, he realized she wasn't calculating probabilities, not really. She was choosing him, deliberately, unpredictably, entirely. And in that choice, he understood the meaning of what he had said so long ago, not as a joke, not as a statistic, but as the spark of something real. He smiled, feeling the weight of years and galaxies between them melt away. "I guess I'd better not joke around about marriage anymore," he said softly. "Do not joke," she replied, with the faintest upward curve at the corner of her lips. "I take this seriously." He laughed. "Good. Me too." And so, amid the flickering holograms, the quiet hum of the apartment, and the endless expanse of stars outside, two unlikely beings, human and alien, chaos and logic, finally found a balance. Love, it seemed, could not be calculated, yet here it was, unpredictable and ineffable, filling the space between them. They did not need models to prove it, charts to define it, or simulations to predict it. They had each other, and that was enough. For the first time, she allowed herself to step fully into the unknown. And he, for the first time in his life, realized that some of the best decisions were the ones you didn't calculate. The human and the alien sat together, silent but connected, letting the universe do what it would, as long as they could choose it together. And in that moment, all the charts, the probabilities, and the calculations faded into irrelevance, leaving only laughter, warmth, and the kind of unpredictable love no algorithm could ever hope to optimize.